Hey everyone, in this episode I'll share what I had to learn about septic systems and how we got one installed on our property. Hey, I'm Dan, and my mom and I bought some land out in the countryside to build a house. And to help with that, we thought we should have a trailer. So why not renovate a 1949 Spartan Manor? So if you want to see how these go, plus some other random DIY stuff, subscribe and follow along. Before we could do anything on this land, we first had to commission a geotechnical report to say where it's safe to build a house and if a septic system could compromise slope stability. In fact, the county does not allow septic drain fields to be installed on hazardous slopes. So we needed this report to say everything was okay before we could hire a septic designer. This report alone cost $1,850, and we filed a copy with the county so we could proceed with the design and permitting. Here in Mason County, at least, you'll hire one company to design your septic system and another to install it to help avoid conflict of interest. You obviously wouldn't want a designer/installer telling you need the most expensive system for which they would profit the most. Before you approach any designer, you'll need, at the very least, to know how many bedrooms you want in your house. This will tell them how many people the system needs to be designed for, taking into consideration toilet and shower use, and thus the size of the tanks and drain field. You may also want to take into consideration any accessory dwelling units you may want to build in the future. At least here in Mason County, it seems that the ADU would need its own septic system and drain field. So this could really affect where you place the drain field of your main house. Another big thing to take into account is the location of any wells. I imagine it varies by county, but you obviously don't want your septic drain field located too close to where you get your drinking water. So make sure you know where that's coming from first. In our case, we have a community well that is well beyond our property lines and any setbacks. Before you go off hiring contractors, it may be worthwhile to check with the county if any septic applications or designs are already on file. It could be that the previous owners already did some of the work. The first thing any designer will need to do is a septic feasibility analysis, or site visit. Most likely they will need to dig some perc holes or percolation holes. These test how well the water drains through the soil and what kind of soil there is. Our property already had perc holes, but they were over 2 years old, so it had to be tested again. So the designer sent out a small excavator to renew them and reevaluate the soil. While he was digging the holes, the contractor was cautiously optimistic that we would be able to install a gravity or conventional system, the most basic type of septic system. Even some of our neighbors have these. So how does such a system work? Very basically, all your wastewater and sewage flows out of your house into a big septic tank. These typically have some kind of divider or baffle across them so that solid materials collect in the bottom of one chamber while only liquids make it to the next. When that liquid level gets high enough, it flows out of the tank through a sloped pipe and a distribution box to a drain field by gravity. Drain fields can vary in how they are built, but basically it's a network of buried pipes or chambers that allow the wastewater to be distributed across a wide swath of soil, often through a bed of gravel. Microbes in the soil then treat the wastewater as it works its way down back to the groundwater. Depending on usage, the septic tank might need to have the solids pumped into a truck from it yearly. The disadvantage of this type of system is that because it's gravity fed, a lot of the absorption of wastewater may only be in the areas closest to the distribution box. This is the least expensive type of septic system, and we were expecting it to be around $10,000. Unfortunately, because of the composition of the soil in this area, which is some 3 feet of brown, moist, medium dense, silty sand and gravel with some clay, sitting atop some very solid hard pan, it was determined we would need a more expensive pressure system. So what's the difference? It's basically the same layout as the system I already described, with a few key differences. Firstly, a second tank or pump tank is required. This is simply another wastewater collection tank and has a submersible pump inside, which is programmed to dose the drain field at particular intervals best suited for the soil absorption. The pipes from the pump are smaller diameter than in the gravity system and lead to a cluster or manifold of valves, each leading to a branch in the drain field. Each of these branches is simply a small diameter PVC pipe with holes drilled into it to distribute the wastewater. I'll show you more on this later, but the manifold of valves is used to ensure that each branch gets an equal flow of wastewater through it, which means the full extent of the drain field is being utilized. A disadvantage of this system is that it requires more maintenance. At least once a year, the drain field pipes should be flushed, in addition to the solids from the septic tank being pumped out by truck. While it's great to have a more efficiently utilized drain field, the cost of a pressure system was estimated between $18,000 to $24,000. It's beyond the scope of this video, but there are even more expensive types of septic systems that might be required depending on the particular circumstances of a property. So, after the Perc tests, the septic designers issued a letter of findings to the county to get approval to design a pressure system. The Perc tests and this letter cost a total of $668. With a green light from the county, they then designed the pressure system. For a 4-bedroom house, this required a 1,250-gallon septic and pump tank and 800 square feet of drain field. This design cost an additional $1,300. This stuff is not cheap. About a month after that, the county told us we needed to record on the deed of our property a 50-foot septic attenuation zone where nothing else can be built. This cost $204. So with an improved septic design in hand, I set out to see if I could do much of the installation myself. I heard from my neighbor that there used to be a class one could take to learn how to install a system on your own property. I looked online but could only find a certification center that would test you had the required knowledge. I downloaded all the reference materials and printed them off, intent to study them and get a certificate, but then I contacted the county and learned that they required not only the certificate, but you also had to be a licensed contractor with 1 year of installation experience. While that was disappointing, I decided to try and find a contractor that would be willing to work with me. That is, I wanted them to allow me to do the installation work and have them test it and sign off on it. Perhaps with the signed agreement that I wouldn't hold them liable for any future malfunction. In the end, I wasn't able to find one, and I can totally understand why. Although it was disappointing to me because I felt confident I could install some tanks and PVC piping. After several months, we finally got a septic installer to do our system. They quoted us about $21,000, not counting fuel charges and taxes. There was a hiccup in this process when I discovered one morning that they were already on our property installing the system, and I had not been told. We wanted to be there to ensure things were going in the right places, and that they knew where our house was going to be, and thus planned the depth of the tanks based on the run of the wastewater pipe leading to the tanks. For this, it's important to know that if you're planning to have a basement, if you want to have plumbing down there, that would require the outlet pipe to be much lower in the ground. They canceled the installation of the tanks, but still proceeded with the drain field without us there. That was pretty upsetting, especially because they initially told me I would be responsible for an additional remobilization fee of $1,750. I proved to them that there had been no communication about the installation date, and so they waived the remobilization fee, and the other charges remained as originally quoted. In the end, with taxes and fuel charges, this system cost us nearly $23,000 for installation alone. So the lesson I learned here is always make sure your communications with your contractors are documented. If you have a phone conversation with them, follow that up with an email restating anything of importance you talked about or agreed to in the call. So we didn't get any footage of the installation of the drain field, but you can see here it was simply some shallow trenches containing PVC pipes embedded in some gravel and all connected to a manifold of valves. About a week later, they returned to install the two 1,250-gallon tanks, the septic and the pump tanks, while we were there.
So the septic tanks are being installed in below freezing weather. I'm going back to the car.
The contractor was a virtuoso with the excavator, so it was fun to watch him drive it around like an extension of his body. In short order, he was able to dig a 10-foot deep hole large enough with a level bottom to hold both tanks. The tanks arrived on a semi-truck with a built-in lifting system to lower the tanks into position. They then began backfilling the hole, then set to work installing the access risers, the inlet and outlet piping with filter, the submersible pump and float switches, and piping to the drain field manifold. For the pump, he gave us the control box, which needs to be installed on the outside of a building within sightline of the tanks for testing purposes. For the inlet pipe, it's just a short length until we build our house. There's an inspection port coming to the surface right there as well. He did tell us that if we ever experienced any issues with toilets backing up in the house, the first thing we should check is this simple filter in the septic tank outlet pipe. Doing this ourselves could save us an expensive visit from a contractor. Even with the tanks partially buried, they warned us that a heavy rain could make them float and completely ruin the installation job. We tried to use the hose on our property, but it was frozen solid. So we had to call out a water truck to fill those tanks as soon as possible before any rains arrived. Unfortunately, this cost us $620. A week after the installation, the contractors returned to test the system with the pump and calibrate the flow of water into each branch of the drain field. To enable this, the end of each branch comes to the surface with a valve, and the height of the spouts are adjusted to be equal using the valves in the manifold. This was also an opportunity for the septic designers to come and verify it was all done correctly and notify the county. This cost $800. Apparently, the county inspectors have some 72 hours once the system is installed to visit and demand any changes. As far as I know, they did not make it out to inspect. Once the system was tested, the contractors were able to finish backfilling the drain field and tanks. So before any work commenced, we had made a down payment of $10,500. In the end, with taxes and fuel charges, this system cost us nearly $23,000 for installation alone. Adding in the designer fees, county fees, and water delivery makes for a total of some $27,025.28. So that's it about our septic installation. I hope this video is useful to you on your own property. Thanks for watching.